On this episode, we're joined by Chris Crocco, a guitarist, composer, and educator whose pursuit of musical truth has redefined his craft. A Berklee College of Music graduate, Chris has performed with legends like Kenny Werner, George Garzone, and Sam Yahel, carving out a unique space in the improvisational music scene. His group Fluid explores music with raw energy, swing, and organic color, offering audiences an unfiltered connection to the essence of sound. Chris's journey also includes his profound mentorship with George Garzone, which pushed him to shed the conventional guitar habits and embrace the Triadic Chromatic Approach. So tune in as we hear Chris's relentless dedication to truth in music, which continues to inspire and challenge audiences worldwide. Chris, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks. I appreciate you asking, and thanks for the intro. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. We were just talking before we hit record, and this is really going to be the first time that you're have this, I guess, long form interview on YouTube. And let me just say to the audience, I'm honored
Oh, thanks.
to be the first one to do it, because Chris is tremendous. So, Chris, I've known about your music for quite some time. And there's one thing that goes hand in hand with your playing, which is that you are the guitarist who is able to translate the George Garzone approach to the instrument. And this is something that's no easy task. So, kind of talk to me about what made you go down that route, your relationship with George. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. It's a long story. We would need days to go through the whole thing. I'll try to summarize it, but and thank you for having me. And I don't do interviews that often. I don't really get asked that much, but that's actually okay because I always want the music to speak for me. Sometimes I feel like that's the best way to know me is through the music and through my teaching. Although I'm happy to talk. I'm an Italian in that way, so I'll go on for days. But anyways, but yeah. So I think it's a long journey and it's a long story. Although every time I have students all the time who ask me about it, and it's really as complicated as it is. It's quite simple. I was and admit to all of my guitarisms when I was younger. So in the 80s, I mean, I've been in New York almost 30 years now. I can't believe I just said that, but it's truth. I was that guitar guy. I played like a guitar player, as you expected, and all of the vernacular and the vocabulary and everything you would know to be. Of course, I went to Berklee. I know you went to Berklee as well, and loved every moment of it. But because of my age, I didn't have the internet. This is pre all 9/11. This is pre everything, right? So this is going back to where it was the old school way, right? It was records, and I was a kid in the middle of nowhere in Virginia, the only Italian boy for 300 miles, and I had to have an outlet. I wanted a place to go, and so Berklee was it. It was wonderful. When I got there, phenomenal, amazing experiences, but at the same time, I always knew something wasn't right. And for me, that was that introduction to all these other instruments and mentors and teachers who were playing in a way that I wasn't. And even though I had guitar teachers, and I had plenty of great guitar teachers and mentors who were saying I was doing well and I was getting better, I always felt something was wrong. And I could go on for days about all of the amazing non-guitar teachers that I had, Hal Crook, Ron Mahdi, all the drummers. I mean, everybody that was at school at that time, and blessed to study with them. But I knew that my playing wasn't where I wanted it to be, but not to be known or famous or have somebody know me. Just for me, just for my own personal sound, something wasn't right. Because I started out as a pianist, and I still play. That was my first instrument. Then I was a drummer, still play, and I did drum corps for a long time. I was a four-mallet percussionist. I was involved in DCI, and I did all of that. And by the time I got to guitar, I wanted to go further into these things. Then I started improvising, like most people did. So I remember I was a couple of years in, and even though I was doing well, I wasn't, in my personal opinion, playing what I wanted to play. And of course, one day, I saw George, and like most people who see George, their life changes when you feel that time and you feel that energy. And I'll never forget that he was with a student group, and he always supports, students and musicians, which is great about George. And I went to see him around the corner from Berklee, a long time ago. The place isn't there anymore. And I remember he stood there, and it was just deep watching him just stand there. And then he waited and he waited. And then when he played, it was like parting every ocean you could imagine. And he cut right through the time. The energy was this like a chainsaw. Immaterial of the notes, the time was unreal. And I knew immediately that was it. And I wanted to have that. But it wasn't, at that moment, it wasn't to say I wanted to be George, I wanted to play like him. It was because he seemed to be as free as anybody, but could play a melody to knock your socks off. So it was this duality of just reckless abandon and going for broke, but at the same time could play, Body and Soul or Soul Eyes, whatever song was being played, as beautiful as anybody's ever played it. And I thought, wow, he's doing both. So I wound up taking his ensemble. This is years ago, obviously, and got my butt kicked in a good way. And I've always been that kind of a player and student. I head towards that fire. I don't shy away from that. I want that kind of energy. I guess I'm like that. I'm not exactly like that as a teacher all the time, but I think I still embody that when I'm teaching my students. I definitely feel like I want to bring that to the table when I'm playing. And long story short, I get out of school, I moved to New York, and I called up George and said, I want to study with you. I hadn't taken a private lesson with him, and this is going back, I don't know what it was like for you when you were at school, but when I was there, it was a different time. You couldn't cross-pollinate instruments. I even asked to, I wanted to study with a trombonist, I wanted to study with a drummer, I wanted to study with George, and they were like, no, you can't do that, it's not part of,
that wasn't allowed when I was there. When I went to NYU for my master's, they let you do that there, but Berklee was pretty much, you have the guitar department, and those are the teachers you get to study with. So, I mean, I don't know if it's changed now, I guess. I don't really know. I haven't.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it has from students who study with me from Berklee now. And at that time, that was rough because I really wanted to do it, but that was okay. It's life. And so I moved to New York, called him up, and I called everybody. I got in touch with Jimmy Bruno, and I got in touch with all kinds of cats in New York. And just by chance, I didn't have them timed out. I had George first, right? I was this young green kid. I went to George and literally called everybody else up, and I said, listen, I appreciate it, but I'll wait. And then that was it. Stayed with George. And that was, I talk about it all the time to my students. I say briefly on my website, it was the beginning of everything. It was that freedom. It was that unlocking. I learned everything that I needed to redo. Essentially, I started all over again. I abandoned my entirety of playing. I'm old enough to know that there aren't very many videos of me back then. There's not, the technology wasn't really there. But if you went back and listened to me then, the stuff that might be floating, I'm a different human. The sound, the way I played, everything I did. So I really just said, I'm done. I've got to get this out. For me, I didn't feel good about what I was playing, what I was doing. But I think ultimately, the best decision, and it's very much my personality, is I had no clue where that was going to go, though. It was pretty scary to say, this is it. And George kind of went like this. It took me a lesson, then 3, and then 7, and then he realized, man, this kid is not going away. He's gonna stick it out. So I think he realized I was serious about it, and then the real, trench work began, and that's a story that takes years to tell. But it's a good 7 years of hardcore, knocked down, really like a mafia film, we were going at it all the time. And I decided I'm going to do it 150%. I'm not going to halfway do it. I'm not going to just steal licks and be that guitar player. No offense to guitar players. It does happen where it's like, I'm just going to take you in and just stick it right back out. I want to do that. I wanted to do the whole thing because ultimately, and now I wind up being that person teaching, is to tell people, George did not want me to be him, and I don't want students to be me. When you study this way, and it's my job to pay forward what was paid to me, is to say, I'm helping you be you. No one comes and studies with me to be a famous person, or all the guys I know in New York. They come to me to unlock their soul for who they are, and that's what George was doing. So and I was honored, but after 5, 6, 7 years of this craziness, and I was like a hermit, no one knew where I was, and even my friends that I sessioned with, I wasn't gigging, nothing was happening. eventually, George asked me to go on the road, and then the rest is history. So I found myself first tour with Liebman and George and all these guys, and it was amazing. But I think looking back, some of my students ask, how did you do that if you didn't know where that was going to go? And that's sort of the whole point of my personality, which was I was excited not knowing. I love that tipping edge, if that makes sense.
No, I'm kind of curious. I know there's the video on your YouTube page of you playing Giant Steps with Peter and Francisco Mela at the Cornelia Street Cafe. Was that around that time, sort of the inception of you gigging and playing this way with that group, or did it go back years before that?
Yeah, that was my first group that I put together, Fluid, when it came to fruition, and that was George, me, and Francisco.
Okay.
And we were headlining, and it was killing, and we played Bar Next Door for a couple years, and it was always amazing and sold out, and it was great. But I was writing, a bassless trio, and I was writing for George and trying to figure out my sound and my way. But I think that that video, it's hard for me, that video. I appreciate that people like it. My wife really pushed me to put that video on, and I didn't want to do it because I'm that old guy. I wanted slick camera angles. I wanted good sound. I wanted it to look good, but it looks horrible. You can only see my elbow and all these things. There's another one of me at Cornelia with Mela and Peter Slavov. That's a little, you can see me better. But the one at Bar Next Door, you can't even really see me. It's
I know,
distorted.
I know what you're talking about. It. Yeah, I'm talking about the one at Cornelia.
Oh, Cornelia, yeah. That was actually videotaped by the late great dear friend of mine who just passed, Claire Daly, who she helped me with that. Yes, that one thankfully
baritone player.
Baritone player, yes.
I didn't know she did that type of work too. She was. I've only met her a couple of times, but she was really, really, really beautiful person.
Claire was the first to embrace me in New York. It was with George and Claire right out of the gate. I was only here a week, and having sushi and the whole thing. But anyways, but yeah, I would say around that time is when I said, okay, it's time for me to, I've got to put it into practice. I got to go out. And that's this art form, right? You can sit in the practice room forever and you can do all these things. And I'm constantly telling my students that the density of what you play has to be profoundly stretched out and reached, and you're going to fail and you're going to have successes. And that's sort of the whole point anyways, and living with that. But yeah, I would say those videos at that time, and I think for me, it was a good chance to say, look, how is this working? The best thing with George and Mela was he was right there. So you could hear it every night. He's blowing and I'm standing right next to him, and we would trade. I think there's a video, just audio of us trading on one of his blues tunes. And that was just like that was a classroom every night to do that. And I think that was great for me.
Well, this was really something special. The way you almost had to unlearn everything that you did, and like you said, it was like start over in a sense. Were there people who tried to influence you to go the other direction? Because that can happen too, but we just kind of have to just everybody.
Yeah. I don't talk about it a lot, not because I don't want to. I want them. If you want to know me, you just listen. If you want to know anything about me, the composition titles, the way I play, the groups. But yeah, pretty much everybody at Berklee. Even when I started this road before I met George, people at Berklee were like, you're not doing this. You're not going down this road. You can't do this. I had pushed back early on because I had started to poke that a little bit. Well, what about this? Or what about that? Or what this? And times have changed. I've taught it at NYU and New School, and then you start to see, and I had piano players and saxophone players study with me there, and that was amazing, and I thought that was great. But back then, that was, not only could you not do that, but it was very much stay in your lane. Then I got to New York, and it was really the same thing too, because it was also a strange sound for a lot of people, and I wasn't good, by the way. I mean, that's the other thing. People think, well, it wasn't very good. I was finding my roots,
I think back about this is a sort of a very specific question. If you can answer it, great, but if not, it's okay.
It's okay.
So one of the first musicians that I really affected me, and I in the way that George affected you, was listening to John Coltrane, because I
Yeah.
got the chills the same way I did when I heard Jimmy Page the first time. It
Oh
was
yeah.
like that physical reaction.
Yeah.
So that kind of woke me up in a sense. And I know George affected you in a very, very profound way the first time you heard him. Do you recall like maybe a music when you were a kid listening to that it's almost like can run parallel to you were affected the same way?
Sure. And it wasn't jazz. I didn't grow up with jazz. I was the first person in my family to do music. And truth be told, and I'm dating myself when I say this, I had been playing drums, mallet percussion, and piano, and I saw Back to the Future. And you see that moment, and you see Michael J. Fox playing Johnny B. Good on this, period thing from Norm's Guitars, that beautiful Gibson 335. It's not a 335. It's a different one. But anyways, yeah, I think, and it was at the very same time I saw that I did a talent show and I was judged as a piano player, but there was a band from a local high school that played that same song. This guitar player that I don't know where he is now. His name is Tim Bray. He was in Virginia. I think he's still teaching, and he played that solo. And I think the nature of seeing, I knew it was improvised. He wasn't even playing the note for note of that. He was doing his own, and I could recognize, man, I want to do that. But I recognized there was a structure, but I also recognized there was a freedom. And it's a lot of people say this now, Branford and Blakey, like the restriction creates the freedom. So for me, that was everything. And yeah, those are those early days, La Bamba. I mean, I'm dating myself and how old I am in those days, but those are those periods. I didn't know jazz. I came to it late. I came to it very late. I didn't hear Kind of Blue till I was much older and all of that stuff. And I take pride in that because nowadays, kids are playing giant steps at 10. I wasn't doing any of that stuff.
Yeah,
None
that's
of that.
just that's just your journey, and I think that's the beautiful part about it, that there's
Yeah.
no one way to get there, and then at the end of the day, you express yourself in the way that's truthful to you. But there is no one way. We can just, as younger musicians in school, when we see people who were exposed to that at an early age, it's like, what? I didn't know what this was. You
No,
know what I
no
mean?
idea. And I have students who constantly say they think I was playing like this then, or they think and I say I wasn't, and they kind of are surprised. I said, listen, come to it when you come to it. Life is longer than we all believe, and I've had students start with me in their 30s and 40s, and they're playing their butts off, and
Wow.
they think wow, and I was like, yeah, what's wrong with this? It's okay, and I like that because I was not this like young lion and all that stuff, and far from that. And I take pride in the fact that I worked hard, and I feel like I've got some natural abilities, and I think George and all my mentors felt like that. But again, my journey was to say, look, I've got to do this for me, and whatever that outcome is that sound. Whatever my sound is I want it to be me, and that's what I'm trying to give my students now. And it was hard, and pretty much everybody pushed back, even friends pushed back, because I think at that time, it was stay in the lane. You'll gig more if you sound like somebody else, right? By the way, people would hire you, and I know you've dealt with this. People hire you because you do sound like a famous something or other. And they don't hire me for that anymore. They only hire me for me, which is cool. That's fine. That's the whole point.
It's interesting too, because I've dealt with people who, like if they want something like really, really like, straight ahead, that it's like almost like you're almost, you have to, they only want you to stay in your lane. And I don't know what it is, but all I can say is that, you had the courage and the will to just to push and be who you are. And I found that as I've talked to people on the podcast, the best mentors told the teachers just to be you.
Oh, without a doubt. And I love that George didn't question anything. He wanted me to be a better me and a better musician, the big M word, not a better guitar player. And to this day, that's always the way it is. And everybody I played with in that way. So I think for me, that was priority number one. And in turn, again, when I'm teaching, I'm saying that same thing. And funny enough, I refuse to go back. I don't fall off that wagon, and I don't care. what I'm playing. Obviously, now I'm playing all the music I want to play generally. But if you go back then, I was still doing GB gigs and club dates and bar mitzvahs and weddings. And I was playing essentially the way people know me now then. And I was learning it worked. No, I didn't ever got fired. No one ever got upset for two reasons. A, my time was good and I wasn't too loud. And when you sit that in that pocket, and I'm talking like, I would say I would look left and right, one of these things, and I would go and do what you know me now, but I would do it then. I wasn't as good. Obviously, not that I'm great now, but it's a journey. And I would realize, wow, everybody's totally fine. We're playing Besame Mucho or something, and I'm trying to blow all of these things. So that was the reality.
That's awesome. So you use those opportunities playing those gigs to almost test the waters and say, can this work? But it was a live setting. It wasn't like you're putting on backing tracks or something. You're doing it in front of real people.
We were getting paid.
Yeah.
I played hundreds of gigs, and I actually got that inspiration from George and those cats because they did it. I would see them, because remember, if you go back then, there wasn't as much documentation of everything as now. So I've seen hundreds and hundreds of shows with these guys, and I'm looking at them going, watching them play like Blue Bossa or something, ripped to shreds. Meanwhile, nobody's, $20 martinis are getting upset, or their lattes or wherever we were playing. And I realized, oh yeah, because the time is amazing and we're not pushing them over. Now, if we're going to play the Vanguard or something, some big place, you're going to, you have the carte blanche. And I thought, man, this is amazing. Now, did I succeed every time? No, meaning musically. But I never had anybody go, don't do that. Because I was trying to be respectful within the space of the music, but do all my thing. And every time I did it and I got better at it and no one ever said anything, I realized, well, either I'm doing it good or I'm using the principles of musicality to show people, listen, there are no wrong notes here, ever, period, end of discussion. There are no wrong notes. And I'm not, that's a general term people get all, well, yeah, you're playing major on minor, minor, major. I'm not saying that. I'm saying in the sense of your expression. And when I was swinging or there's time or the group, and you hear a melody and everybody starts checking off the boxes. Okay, Chris did this, he did this, he did. When we get to the bottom, if they go, Chris checks out, well, then we're good. Next. And that's really.
It's so interesting that you got I don't want to use the word acceptance, but you got the freedom in those situations versus playing like, duo gigs in a restaurant, playing straight, you know what I mean? They're playing
That's
tunes.
right. That's right. And I
awesome.
think that was an emotional moment to recognize it wasn't just some modern concept. I had to be musical. I had to understand all that, and I had to find my way through it. So it's a long journey, and I'm still on it. My big thing is I tell people I need 6 lifetimes to achieve what I need, what I want. I'll never do it. It's impossible because what's in my head and what I want to play, and it's not possible. But I'm getting better, better.
So you're in quite a musical space. I know there's that. Is that's sort of like your
yeah, I'm in the music building here in New York, and I've been all over. I was in a loft space about 15 years ago around the corner, and then I moved in here in a smaller, very small room, and I was there for about 4 or 5 years, and then I've been here since the pandemic. I took advantage of things that were going on to try my best to get a space like this, and it's been great. And I'm teaching all the time.
No, it's a beautiful space you have.
Thanks.
There.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, it's nice.
All that stuff is yours, like the drums and everything.
Yeah, everything's here, and I've been, I teach all the time, but now I'm doing. Maybe some people have seen. I'm doing shows here. I try to put it up online for people to watch the stream and everything. But yeah, it's great. I mean, it's almost like, to me, it's like the loft scene was years ago, right? It's like the way it was. 35 people sit here. I pulled out chairs. Everybody's having a good time, and we're going for broke, and I don't really. It's great. It's got that energy. There used to be a lot more of these, and a lot more hangs and squats and things. It's not the way it was, but I figured, why not? I have the space, in addition to teaching. Let's do it. So I'd like to record here. That's my next project, for lack of a better term. And I don't care if it bleeds. And old school. Let's put it up. Put some cameras. I just have been so busy. I haven't, unfortunately, gotten to it. So.
Um, what are some places that you would like to present that your music that you haven't gotten a chance to yet? Does anything come to mind where you feel like maybe the vibe of the room or the acoustics or just the way, is there a place that you would like to play that you haven't gotten the chance to yet?
I think I'm going to sound like every kid. I'd love to play the Vanguard.
Yeah,
Who doesn't want to play the Vanguard?
right.
I've played them all except the Vanguard. So that's every other club in New York I've played. Um, but life takes its way, and if it happens, it happens, and if it doesn't, that's okay. That's all right. I'm here to find my soul and my freedom, and I found my freedom years ago. So I'm just riding that wave of being open to that, and I talk about that all the time. I'm okay now because I did all that hard work to get to the other side. Not that I'm anything special. Constantly practicing, constantly trying to get better melodies. Want to play good melodies, in addition to all the crazy stuff I play. But yeah, I would love to. I would love to do that.
But the way you said the Vanguard though, like you're like if it happens, good. But if not, that's okay too. Like you actually meant it because some people would say that, and you could hear like almost a frustration in their voice. But you were just like, it's what it is.
No, I think I've gotten to that place in my life that if I literally never play a show again, and I'm sitting in this room and I'm teaching, and I'm blowing my brains out and I'm getting better, I am fine with it. I really am. And it's
Yeah,
not
man.
because, we all want gigs. Would I love to tour again like I was? Sure. It's post-pandemic. It's harder. I've been asked by the cats who know me in Europe, but to come back over and play. I have a family and I'm working, and so it's a little bit more difficult. I have students all over the world who study with me, and that presents some interesting, hilarious, funny, amazing moments that I love. I look, man, like you, I'd love to gig and do all those things, get my music out there, and I have a book of tunes, like this that I'm constantly writing, and the portfolio is growing. But I think that I don't know if it's my personality or my age or my generation. I don't know what it is, but I'm content with knowing that my craft and my art and my sound, you will find if you hear me.
Yeah.
That's it.
I love
That's
to
what I
just
want.
play alone. You know what I mean? Like when
Yeah.
no one's there. Like that's my favorite thing, just to play when no one's there and just get
Oh,
inside the
constantly.
sound. You know what I mean? And
Oh, without a doubt. That's a beautiful thing that you just said. And for me, I'm 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 comfortable in all the settings. I don't need the typical, my first big group with George and Mela was bassless. Then I had a quartet. Then I would do duo, and I'm constantly, those sorts of things are there. And the very first thing I ever did in high school, one of my dear friends was a drummer, and because we didn't have anybody, we would play for hours after school, just drums and guitar in high school for hours, where, you have no responsibilities.
I had a friend like that in middle school too. We just play.
Oh, that was amazing. And for me, I was cutting my teeth on that space, embracing space, embracing. It's not fatiguing anymore. It's not like people like they look at oh, I'm not playing. Yeah, you're right. You're fine. What do you mean you're fine? Yeah, you're totally fine. Let the space breathe. Play the space, and just sitting back and letting that happen. And I think I'm glad I did that, just because I'm weird and I was like, let's try it, and that's why now it's the same thing. So it doesn't matter whether it's two people or no one or eight people in a band. It's life, it's characters, it's the love of that. I hope that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense.
No. I think it makes total sense to be completely honest with you. And your outlook is such a positive one, and you seem so balanced and it's
Well,
you're
thanks.
laughing.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like I tell my students I'm like a masochist, because I don't think I'm a sadist, but I'm that way because I I just started playing soccer, and I'll run till my lungs bleed, just because it's sort of the inside of me always be that way. And honestly, Abe, you gotta be like that in this industry, and these musicians. We're talking about George. We're talking about some heavies, cats that I would tour with. Kenny, look, everybody you play with, they expect that of you. They expect you to drop the hammer 150%, or they're not going to call you. Period. And that's what I wanted to do. But I didn't do that to be famous. I did it just because I thought, this is great. This is fun.
Yeah.
I'm that little kid. I'm just that little kid. The only difference now is, yeah, we play more complicated music, but what's changed? I'm doing now the same thing I did when I was 7 years old. It happens to be in New York and happens to be with complicated music and great musicians. But nothing's changed for me. That joy of trying to say, I'm a little kid. I just want to blow my brains out at whatever that is. That's the same, you know.
Yeah, and it's that's so beautifully said. When you think about this lifestyle as a way to make a living, and some people can be very confused when they get out of school. They think they get out of school and they're automatically going to be able to make a living as a professional jazz musicians. There's a lot of misconceptions about the life. Do you feel strongly about any of those misconceptions about what it is to be a jazz musician?
Um, oh, do you want the safe answer, or do you want the maybe ruffle the four-letter word world answer?
Let's do the longer one.
So the longer one is my personal feelings about what I see and what I hear and what I'm trying to do, which is that there's no sex in this music. There's no risk in this music, but there used to be. That doesn't mean that there aren't people doing that, because I know even personal friends in New York, but they are overwhelmed by everything else that isn't that. I think that if you get out of school and you're like, I'm going to be a jazz musician, I don't see anything wrong with that. If that is your goal and that's what you aspire. So the answer to that is do it. But if you think you're going to get out and you're the next Pat Metheny in 2 seconds, it's not going to happen. It's not. It's a reality. But that sounds like I'm being cold. The truth is that,
No, I think you're totally right.
yeah, I mean, but it's also a sense of saying, but that's okay. See, I have students who they look at the end before the beginning. They look at the final product and they haven't even gotten out of the garage. What are we doing? Let's get into the trenches. So what I'm saying is that I don't have any problem with that if people want to aspire to that, but to recognize that it's hard, that it's poor, that it's difficult, it's long. 5 years turns into 10, 10 years turns into 20. Now along that way, you get better. Your soul gets better, your sound gets better, who you are gets better. And that's really the whole point. But look, there are exceptions. People come out, boom, boom, boom. You get a deal, you go on, blah, blah, blah. Absolutely, that happens. But I think when I said there's no sex in this music anymore, there's no risk in this music anymore, there was a time where you couldn't go on stage and just play covers all night long, and you couldn't play what was safe. You had to. People didn't hire me to do that. They hired me because they knew what I was going to bring and blow and elevate that music. And at that tipping point of total chaos, right? You're right on the edge where it could all collapse. And it did, because I have failed in that. But it's an amazing place to be right there. There are exceptions. There are plenty of people. I have friends, personal friends who I can vouch for in this city, who are famous actually. And I would say they do play with sex as a metaphor. They do play with risk. But nowadays, when kids come out of school, they're so over-intellectualized, it gets to the point where, I'm still doing this as a kid who watched Michael J. Fox. Why are you doing it? And if you're doing it because you want to play, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just, it's so easy to copy and just, copy what everyone else is doing. It is a shortcut, but at the end of the day, you're not doing anything new. But if you do something new, if you try to do something new, you will fail 90% of the time, in the beginning for years.
That's right, Abe. And that makes you. That's what I remember. That's what makes you. That's why hopefully one day people they hear one or two notes and they go, that's Chris. That's Beautiful. It. Yeah. That's it. That's what it's about. So finding your voice in that. Look, kids come out, they study with me all the time. These kids can play giant steps backwards underwater in 7/8. That's great. Listen, that's awesome. Okay, let's play a ballad at 50.
Yeah.
Show me the intensity of a melody. Nope. That we've lost this way with this sort of, I'm not saying not to do that crazy, awesome music, because if anybody sees my music, they go, wow, that's pretty crazy. But what I'm saying is, you know what I'm saying? There's an intensity. And when I was brought up through the ranks, when those mentors grabbed a hold of me, they expected that. But they were also saying, listen, we are giving you what was paid forward to them, and now I'm paying forward as well. And there's a certain amount of listen, we're bringing what we're bringing. And this isn't to do PEF 10 blah 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 Berklee and make a song. And that's not what this is about. To me, it's not about playing a show or doing my thing to impress somebody that he played this. No. It should be that people come and they feel the intensity and the time and all of that, because that's what you said about Jimmy Page. I said I felt the same way with George. It wasn't the notes that he was playing. I didn't care the scale that he was playing. I didn't care any. I was like, it was just literally hitting me upside the head, and that intensity was amazing. I felt the same way when I heard Rush the first time, John Coltrane the first time, that sort of Shostakovich the first time. If though that makes sense.
Totally get it. No, Chris, this has been amazing, and I'm honored to be the first person to dive deep into this stuff. But I want to thank you so much for doing this today.
You're welcome. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen.
Thanks, man.